We'll be moving on to our next speaker, Danny Ryan, who is a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation. Danny does research primarily on consensus upgrades for the Ethereum Foundation. Thank you for joining us, Danny.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I will share my screen. I have a presentation prepared for y'all. So first of all, thank you for having me at the MIT Bitcoin Expo. I wish I could be with y'all in person, but here we are. I'm Danny Ryan. I work at the Ethereum Foundation. Like you said, I work on the research team, and I'm focusing primarily on like major consensus upgrades. Consensus being the thing that allows you to have these systems in a decentralized context to begin with. Proof of work, that very known one. Proof of stake, some of the things that you're seeing in newer protocols and other kind of protocols there. Specifically, Ethereum, which is currently a proof of work protocol, has been planned to move to proof of stake, a different consensus mechanism, since really, I think before the launch, there's been kind of talks and research. And for years, we were in kind of this research phase, but in the past couple of years, we've been in an engineering phase and are on the verge of migrating Ethereum finally from proof of work to proof of stake. And when I say proof of stake in Ethereum land, the actual instantiation of this is called the Beacon Chain. And the Beacon Chain did launch last year on December 10th. It's in production today. And so I'm going to talk to you about what it means, it being in production, where we're going, and some of the kind of design and philosophy things behind this. Obviously, we're at a Bitcoin conference. So some of the things I might say might be coming from kind of a different angle, maybe some different assumptions, and ultimately, we're designing different systems. So I hope you enjoy taking a look into our experiment. So Beacon Chain has launched. So what is the Beacon Chain? The Beacon Chain is a highly sophisticated proof of stake consensus mechanism. It's a crypto economic protocol similar to proof of work in that consensus participants allocate a scarce economic resource to the protocol, and in exchange for that get some sort of reward. And the byproduct of that is that it builds and secures the system. In proof of work, that is hardware and energy, and in proof of stake, it's actually the native kind of in protocol token itself. So the locking up and allocation of Ether to this protocol allows me to participate in the protocol, and as a byproduct, secures the protocol. So the Beacon Chain is this system that is disparate from the existing proof of work system that was launched on December 10th and is kind of operating in isolation currently. And what it does really is it builds itself and it comes to consensus on itself. But the intention is once you have the mechanics in place to come to consensus on itself, you can easily slot in other things and come to consensus on things that are valuable to Ethereum, namely the state, contracts, all that kind of stuff. So I said it's highly sophisticated. I'll give you a glimpse into why I say that. Highly sophisticated proof of stake consensus, it probably, I believe, is maybe the most sophisticated proof of stake consensus in production today. And this is just a glimpse into some of the fun things about it. There's over 117,000 validators in this system. It is important to note that a validator is this logical consensus entity that is composed of 32 Ether. But if I had, say, 64 Ether and want to participate in the system, I would actually be 2 validators. So there's not a one-to-one relationship between a validator and maybe the staker running it, and not a validator and the actual nodes. And so we know there's over 7,000 depositors, so many people participating, although some of these might be duplicates. And then on the live network, there are over 2,700 nodes. And this is just on the kind of the Beacon Chain architected system. On the Ethereum mainnet with all the contracts and things today running proof of work, it's more like 10,000. So this is a little bit of a subset, but that would move towards that number as the migration happens. And there's actually more than 3.6 million ETH staked today, which I think is like over $6 billion, $7 billion. So there's a lot of weight behind this thing. And like any crypto economic protocol, the amount of value securing the protocol as kind of the amount of value locked and participating in the protocol dictates kind of the security profile of that protocol. So that's a little bit of like the numbers breakdown over there. And to the right, we have we have one block happening every 12 seconds. It's 28 of these logical committees per slot currently, although that will scale up to 64 eventually. So subsets of validators doing different roles. So over 3,600 messages per slot. So coming in every 12 seconds, which is quite a bit. And so there's some fun technology that allows us to do that. And you can actually run multiple of these validators on consumer hardware as small as a Raspberry Pi. So we have people that are running like 8 validators on a Pi today. And consumer hardware, this has been designed for consumer hardware. There's 4 production clients. So this is spec first rather than implementation first. So the protocol is dictated by a written spec. There's multiple implementations of that. It makes things harder in some respects, but it also makes things, I think, safer and more redundant. And there's over 100 layer 1 engineers working on this project day and night. So a lot of cool stuff going on there. This is a heat map of, well, a node map of the global distribution of nodes on this network today. I think we have all continents except for Antarctica represented. Obviously, some of the normal hotspots we'd see. We have some friends in Sydney building out a client, so some fun stuff down there. And I wonder who's in Africa. But so pretty solid distribution across the globe on this network today. So the beacon chain is designed for decentralization. A lot of these more modern proof of stake protocols, I think some of them are very sophisticated, some of them kind of cut corners for scale, cut corners in terms of like the cryptography that they use that maybe limits the amount of participants that can participate in this protocol, because more participants can often mean more load and more complexity. But in ETH2, in this beacon chain design, we've taken in some kind of advanced cryptographic and game theoretic techniques to allow for many consensus participants, and thus participants can participate with a low amount of value. So BLS signatures allow for signature aggregation. And so although we're sending tons of these messages on the network, 3,600 per 12 seconds right now, you can actually do on network, there's these aggregation protocols that allow for combining like signatures so that when they get on chain, they are much orders of magnitude, 100 times faster to verify, and much smaller in terms of the bandwidth load and the actual block payload. You can participate with as low as 32 ETH. This number maybe a year ago was obviously lower in terms of USD value, but even then, in terms of the amount of consensus participants, we can handle quite a bit because of this number. And even beyond that, I'll mention this MPC friendliness. There's been much care taken such that being a validator is MPC friendly, multi-party computation friendly, which enables more sophisticated designs like decentralized staking pools and other types of security options. So say I'm a home staker and I want more redundancy, I can split up my keys and have 3 machines that are talking to each other and come to consensus with each other to participate in the protocol and maybe have some more redundancy or different types of security options. And like I said, everything's been designed to run on commodity hardware. And that's to run some small amount of validators on a commodity hardware, because validators represent duties to the protocol. If I had 10,000 validators, then my responsibilities have scaled with the amount of validators, and so I might not be able to run them on home commodity hardware, but I can participate as a hobbyist on the order of 110 validators with commodity hardware. But why? Why is Ethereum moving to proof of stake? Why give up something that is stable and in production for something that is new and represents different kind of properties for this in production system? And there's really 3 broad reasons to make the system more secure, make the system more scalable, and make the system more sustainable. And I will get into each of those points. And some of these, I think the middle one is probably not debatable, but the security and sustainability, obviously, like proof of stake has fundamentally different security properties and sustainability properties than proof of work. And so there's a little bit of philosophical debate under some of these, but we can talk about why I believe they're true. So more secure. The idea here is to get more security with a smaller budget, or even with the same security budget. And by security budget, I mean issuance and fees, the value that's going, the incentive for economic participants to participate in this crypto economic protocol. Can we get more security for the same cost? Because issuance is essentially a cost to the network and cost to the network participants. So the idea is that by moving the economic asset securing the protocol into the protocol, we can actually increase the security. We can get a larger security guarantee. And the idea here is that there's two types of ways you can think about attacking these protocols. We have a budget to the attack. So what is the required amount of capital to attack a crypto economic protocol? Often we think about that is take all the assets on securing the network today. You need to double the assets. You need to be over 50% of those assets, and that is the budget. That's how much it's going to cost to the amount of capital required to conduct the attack. But then the question is, now that I've conducted the attack, what's the actual cost? And I would argue in proof of work that the cost is zero, because once you have 51% of the network, you are the network. You're totally in control. There are some nuances here, because with ASICs and things, you might be degrading the value of your ASICs, and so there's a little bit of there's a complex cost calculation. But in the notion of proof of stake, because that asset is in protocol, the protocol can then essentially burn that asset in the event of an attack. So it can define a concrete cost for that attack. And so with proof of stake, because we have this asset to be programmed into the protocol, we can get some really nice properties with respect to this cost of attack. So similar budget to attack, but then you have very high cost because there are certain types of attacks that can be proven to the protocol, and thus those assets can be totally destroyed. So that's one of the reasons, primary reasons, is move to this more secure protocol. Another one is to get more scale out of the protocol. Ethereum is quite in high demand with respect to the amount of supply of block space today. And so there are many, many different parallel fronts to figure out how to bring more scale to the system. Some of it is happening at L2 with rollups and other exciting things. And some of it is happening in L1, in layer one. How do we take a consensus mechanism and safely and securely get more scale out of it without shutting out consensus participants from running nodes at home? And so written here is, how do you get, if OFC resources is consumer resources like a laptop, how can we get a consensus mechanism to safely come to consensus on more than OFC? And there's a number of techniques here that we employ. So Ethereum, the beacon chain is to be used for sharding. It's the name of how we come to consensus on more stuff. One of those is random sampling. Because the consensus participants are actually in the protocol, you can use random sampling techniques to send subsets of them to different parts of the system to validate them. So each part of the system can be OFC resources, and at any given time as a validator, I'm sent to that part of the system and I'm validating that component. And so I don't exceed that OFC resources, but the consensus mechanism as a whole can. Data availability sampling. This uses random sampling of data that can actually protect against unavailable and invalid data, even when there's a greater than 50% attacker, which is very cool. So that it kind of hardens the random sampling. If you have a corrupt committee or corrupt subset of validators that make claims about that portion of the system, if those claims are invalid, the data availability sampling then actually prevents the network from following those invalid claims. And then we have these constructions called proof of custody, which are crypto economic commitments of custody and computation that a validator and a committee, when they go and work on a subset of the network, they're making claims, non-outsourceable claims about that they actually did the work. And so these things kind of come together to allow us to architect systems that bring more scale and more sustainable. I think this is going to be I think this is increasingly a hot button item for Ethereum. I know that especially the NFT community is really questioning proof of work and why it's here. And I think in the Bitcoin community, there's a little bit of pushback on that claim, whether it matters. But I would say, because the amount of hash power generally scales with the amount of value of the network. If we have another 10x on Bitcoin, then it's going to be quite a conversation about sustainability and about energy consumption. And I know we like to point to the guy using solar panels and the guy using excess energy and stuff to power his miners. And I think that there's some of that there, but I would estimate that these are stories that we like to tell ourselves, and that the vast majority probably uses pretty traditional energies. But anyway, when we move to a proof of stake protocol, the crypto economic asset, the mining hardware, moves and becomes instead the in protocol asset. To demonstrate that asset is locked and participating in the protocol, you don't have to burn tons of energy. Essentially, just part of proof of work is like, yes, I have all this hardware, but I have to prove that it is dedicated to the protocol, and the way I do that is doing all these computations. So we eliminate that and end up having like a crypto economic protocol that's like 99.99% more energy efficient, which I think is something very important to me and very important to the Ethereum community. So we're excited about that. So what now? The beacon chain is live. Like I said, this system is live, but it's running in parallel to the existing Ethereum system today. So all of the contracts, all the accounts and all that, that's still happening under proof of work. The proof of work is still driving that system. Whereas over here, we have this new proof of stake system that's architecting itself, but it's not really, it's only kind of related in that the Ether has made deposits and kind of locked in the system, but it's not really doing much for this system over here. And so what are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to come to consensus on things. It's a consensus mechanism. And so what are we going to come to consensus on? The first thing, and the thing that we're working on most today, is called the merge. And this is hot swapping Ethereum's consensus mechanism from proof of work to proof of stake. So going from at one moment in time, the proof of work miners securing things and building things, to the next moment in time, the beacon chain, the proof of stake validators securing and building things. So the value and activity of Ethereum lies in the application layer. So accounts, contracts, dApps, all that kind of stuff. It's in this application layer. And there's this then essentially proof of work module that's like the driver of that. And after the merge, essentially we're taking that proof of work module and we're swapping it for this beacon chain module. And so the application layer ends up being almost entirely the same, but kind of living in a different cradle, living in a new home. And so that's what we're working on a ton today. This is a confluence. It's a confluence of, I can't remember which two rivers, but it's two rivers coming together. So I really like that imagery. And I actually just put some more pictures of confluences because they're really cool. And I actually live near this one on the top right, and I want to go see it now. But the merge, AKA confluences, are cool. We're bringing these two systems together. And the next thing that we want to come to consensus on is sharding, is we want to come to consensus on more. And like that's that O of C thing. Can we use a consensus mechanism to come to consensus on more resources? And the idea here is to come to consensus on a ton of data, like 1 to 4 megabytes of data per second in the system, and to use this data to bring scale to Ethereum. And if you're following Ethereum today, rollups are very exciting. There's a number of them live today and a number of them coming on live over the next few months. And these are layer 2 systems that inherit the security of Ethereum, and they scale with the amount of layer 1 data that Ethereum has. Today, that's just the single blockchain's data. Whereas if we bring on this sharded model, we have tons of more data for these data hungry rollups to scale with. And that's kind of the scaling vision here, is that we have the application layer of today living under the beacon chain. We have a ton of sharded data to facilitate these rollups. And these rollups are kind of like checking in commitments to these sharded data into that application layer. There are potential ways to scale out additional state, layer 1 state and execution on these shards. But first and foremost, we're coming to consensus on data. And this is some art from a movement called Ryanism, an art movement called Ryanism in the early 1900s in Russia, in which they used beacons and shards of light. So it seemed relevant. And then I'm talking primarily about like L1, layer 1 development and research in the Ethereum community. There's a lot of other active stuff going on. Like I said, what I'm focused on and what is this beacon chain is consensus upgrades for Ethereum through this beacon chain, the merge and sharding. But there's tons of other really fun stuff going on. I just want to give you a glimpse here in case you want to get involved. Stateless research, so advanced state management techniques how can I, running a node, maybe just care about certain portions of the state and still have maximum security guarantees that things are being transitioned properly, rather than having to have 100 gigabyte, 200 gigabytes of state locally. Advanced cryptography, zero knowledge proofs are super hot, and I'm blown away. This is really my area, but I'm blown away not only the breakthroughs in research, but how quickly these are being applied and coming on online. There's like a roll up live right now in beta that uses zero knowledge proofs to bring scale, not only scale, but also privacy in this role. Very cool. New signature schemes. We're hanging out with BLS and some other fun stuff, doing a lot of research on efficient NPCs and more. Layer 2 scaling, like I've mentioned a number of times here, the scaling model of Ethereum is really to have L1 and L2 complement each other to bring massive scale to this decentralized system. There are a number of these live today and a number of more general purpose ones coming live in the next few months. Game theory, obviously this is all like game theory and economics in some sense. There's a lot of cool research going on in fee markets. So like this big upgrade called 1559, which enhances the auction for like the first price public auction into a more predictable model for Ethereum. We do a lot of work modeling validators and attacks, some work on fair auctions, digging into automatic market makers and strategies and impermanent loss. I don't know, like Ethereum's just like a big sandbox of fun stuff. And that's why I wake up every day and work on it. But that's just kind of a glimpse into a lot of the fun stuff we're working on. So, like I said, I'm Danny Ryan. That's my Twitter, that's my GitHub. The ETH R&D Discord, which has been up for about a year, is where like a lot of the conversation around a lot of the stuff I'm talking about happens. That QR code brings you there if you're interested. Lurk, participate. There's tons of channels, lots of cool stuff. Come and get involved.
Great, thank you, Danny. And on that note about Discord, if you want to share that in our Discord, actually, I think it'll be easier for people to find it.
Yeah, I can do that.
I want to apologize. Danny's name was misspelt on our banner. It has 2 N's in it. So sorry about that.
Oh, dude, that's all right.
We are now approaching the lunch break for the day. We'll be gone for about an hour. When we come back, we will have Hester Pierce with Neha Narula doing a Q&A session. Hester Pierce is the Security and Exchange Commission's commissioner. So very exciting talk to have her. As always, the Gather Town, we'd love to see you there. The Expo committee will be there, sponsors, speakers, and other attendees. Have a good lunch break, everybody.